Hello and welcome back to the show. So I am joined here by a very special guest today, Scott Royal Smith. Scott is the founder of Royal Legal Solutions, a company that actually helps real estate investors become the CEO of their own wealth building company by helping them protect their assets and help them save a lot of money on their taxes as well. So we're going to be digging into all of these strategies for how real estate investors and entrepreneurs can not only build wealth, but also protect their wealth and protect their assets as well with Scott. And without further ado, I want to bring on Scott to the show and welcome to the show, man.
No, thanks, Cody. Great to be here.
Absolutely. I am very excited to have you on because you are going to be an expert in what you're talking about today, which is asset protection. And I think there's a lot of people out there who can benefit from your knowledge and benefit from, just the value you're going to share today. But before we dig into all of that, would you mind sharing maybe just a little bit about how you got into real estate and more specifically how you got to kind of what you're doing today, which is helping people protect their wealth once they build it?
Yeah, so I actually got into real estate during law school. I bought a commercial property and an existing auto repair business for like $10,000 in back taxes. And I was like, all right, cool, I can flip it and make a quick 5K. But we just actually kept it and we rehabbed the business in the building, and then it helped us graduate from law school without any debt, because of that deal. And that's when I fell in love with real estate. So as I was working as an attorney, suing insurance companies, turns out insurance companies are great at collecting premiums and even better at denying coverage. So we'd sue him for that. And I was eventually hit making enough money in real estate where I was like, great, I've hit my financial freedom numbers and I'm out of the game. So I went and climbed Mount Kilimanjaro, and I was traveling around. And then all of a sudden, a friend of mine said, hey, Scott, I just got sued for $3 million. And I said, well, you have your umbrella insurance policy, just like you told me to get. He was like my mentor. And he said, well, my umbrella insurance policy actually is it's not going to cover the claim. So he lost $3 million from a single lawsuit, even though he's really well insured. And that's when I started to say, hey, well, okay, it's one thing to get free, it's another thing to be durably free, right? And that's where I started to get serious about like how to own my assets anonymously, how to make sure they're compartmentalized and sell LLC structures, and okay, what do I need to do with my deal pipeline to make sure that after I consume all of the depreciation out of my properties, that I have my next deal lined up so I can create more and more of a lifestyle that's going to be more and more free, so I can go do more cool stuff in the world, which is, and now my company is essentially an extension of everything that I needed to do that we offer to other people that want to do this for themselves, that has all of the CPAs and the attorneys and the paralegals and the meetings schedules and the systems and the processes. And I spend about 3 hours a quarter managing my wealth through my team. And that's what we offer to our clients, is like, how can you get that streamlined and that professional to be able to make where money just turns out to be a very boring yet very boring but very useful part of your life.
Yeah, absolutely. And I love what you said there about essentially, having freedom, but having also durability of that freedom, right? Because the worst thing that can, I think, for people to have is, have built up a life of freedom, maybe have a portfolio of real estate properties, and then, like the person you were talking about gets sued and just be completely underwater or, have to stress over things like that, right? Because once you build something up, right, there's going to be risks from the outside, essentially that are able to take it down. So, from what you've seen of real estate investors that are out there, kind of small to medium investors who have maybe like 10 or 12 rental properties, what would you say is kind of the biggest mistakes that you have come across of people that have consulted with you where they're not protecting their assets correctly? And how can they actually fix that issue at this point?
Yeah, so the biggest number one thing is that people that own assets inside of their personal name. I mean, there's a reason why rich people don't own things. They have companies that own them, right? Second biggest mistake is that they have a big umbrella insurance policy and they think that's sufficient. That umbrella insurance policies only protect you against some accidents that might happen. But especially if you're doing business and owning properties in your personal name, like any contracts that you might sign, emails that you send, etc., are all ways in which that you can get sued, and your insurance will never protect you from any of those kinds of lawsuits. For example, I had a client of mine who has had a series LLC, which is the most efficient way to be able to like bucketize or compartmentalize every asset that you own. And she did a flip. And one of the child series, for I know we haven't talked about that yet, but that's the smallest unit you can get into, and like a bucket to hold an asset. And she sold the property out of that to somebody. And there was some email discussion back and forth about like what plumbing had been replaced in the property. Well, when the buyer was on vacation, there was a leak in some of the plumbing and cost $75,000 in damages. So who do you think the buyer went to? They didn't just take it on the chin. They're like, I'm going to sue whoever sold me the property because obviously they screwed me, which is happens. That's how just people are. I mean, everybody lies. That's why being truthful and being honest doesn't protect you from lawsuits, because when people get hurt, they look to blame somebody else. And when that happens, the truth gets a little fuzzy, right? Um, so anyway, they ended up coming in to sue, and I talked to the plaintiff's attorney, and I said, "Great, you know, you guys may win the lawsuit. I don't know, because it's a jury of 12 random people, and based upon these emails, if you sue us, you may win the lawsuit. But the problem is that there's not going to be anything here left to collect against, because the client made all the representations through an operating company." And that's a company that doesn't own anything. It's just there to be the front face of her, essentially, to the world. And also, the company that sold the asset to you is a child series, this series LLC, and all the cash from that has already been distributed. And that entity also doesn't own anything. So no matter who you sue in this lawsuit, you may win the lawsuit, and what you're going to find is there's no money there to go after. So we ended up getting a $75,000 lawsuit dropped totally before it even started, because we were able to have the right proactive structures in place to make it where the business of the lawsuit doesn't make sense for people to sue our clients. And that's how you win lawsuits before they start. And that's actually what good protection does for you, is it anonymizes the ownership of the asset to make it look like you don't own anything, which is great to stop lawsuits because people don't sue people that doesn't look like they own anything. And secondly, it makes it where all the assets are compartmentalized. So if they do sue, they get little to nothing. And then once somebody gets angry and we explain that to them, they don't move forward with the lawsuits.
Yeah, and that's a really good strategy, right? If somebody's not even going to move forward with a lawsuit because of the essentially at the end of the day, they're not going to get anything out of it because you've protected yourself so well through the different strategies that you've implemented proactively. So let's take a moment, I think, and talk maybe a little bit about that. So you mentioned one of the biggest issues for a lot of investors out there today who maybe are not protecting themselves correctly is that they own the assets in their own name. So just from your experience, what would you say are some of the the correct entities to set up? And what is your recommendation for an investor to be able to actually protect their assets to the best of their abilities? Is it corporation, LLC? What would you suggest for an investor, and maybe what are the different pros and cons of each?
So when you're talking about different types of corporate structures, like whether they're C corps, S corps, LLCs, they actually all provide the same exact asset protection. The only reason you're choosing between those different structures is actually has to do with taxes. So the part of your tax strategy will depend upon what kind of entity do you need to use. But what people don't know a lot of is that you can actually just elect, if you form an LLC, how do you want it to be taxed? So I say just keep it really simple. Just use LLC structures, unless you're in California. And if you're in California, then you're going to use some type of trust structure because you're going to want to avoid franchise taxes. So let's just use, for example, like say everybody that's outside California, and like what do they have going on right now? So if you're outside of California right now and you have multiple properties, if they're in the 1 to 4 unit space, then I would say use a series LLC, and then use trusts, like land trusts in association with a series LLC. And that'll give you anonymity of the ownership of the LLC. It'll anonymize the ownership of your asset. That'll allow you to have all the existing financing can stay in place from all the great conforming loans that you got. You're going to be able to transfer those in through this trust and series LLC structure. And you'll be able to manage everything in a single bank account with a single tax return and one set of accounting books, as long as you track the income and expenses of each property separately, which you're probably already doing anyway, to be able to say what's my true ROI of this property. If you own commercial properties and a group of 1 to 4 unit properties, then you'll take a series LLC, and then you'll have individual LLCs that will own all those individual multifamily or commercial properties. And the reason that you have those as individual LLCs, one is because it creates a nice little bucket for that asset. And two, it's because it's likely what was required for financing, to have a single purpose entity to be able to close on those commercial buildings. And then you merge these together to the extent that you need to. So if you have only commercial and multifamily, you're just going to have a bunch of LLCs. one LLC per property, and then one mothership LLC. If you have 1 to 4 unit property and commercial, then you're going to have a series LLC with a bunch of individual child series to hold those 1 to 4 unit properties in conjunction with some trusts. And then you're going to have these individual LLCs that own all of your commercial property. They're all in turn owned by your series LLC. Now, if that sounds really confusing to you, it's not a big deal. That's why we get on the phone with everybody and start drawing out diagrams to say, hey, look, here's some pretty pictures to show you exactly like what this all looks like. But at the end of the day, what you're looking for is the simplest banking structure and the simplest set of accounting books and the lowest annual costs. And you want to achieve that while creating anonymity and compartmentalizing every asset. And that's the magic of asset protection.
Right. So you mentioned this a couple of times, as we're talking, is being anonymous, right? Owning your properties anonymously. So, you mentioned a little bit about how you're able to do that. But as far as from an owner's perspective, what are, I would say, like, what are the most obvious reasons why they want to own something anonymously? Is there, will there not be able to be sued at all at that point? Or, is it just because it's just part of the deal and they're protecting themselves using these kind of, series LLCs and structures, and, being anonymous is just part of it? Or is there actual, I would say, like, actual benefits of being an anonymous owner of these properties?
Yeah. So your first line of protection from any lawsuit you're going to have is always going to be your insurance policy, and that's why you should have the minimum insurances, but then also have like a $1 to $3 million umbrella insurance policy. And so then, if the insurance isn't going to cover it, right, which is what we really want them to do, it's just like, hey, you handle it and go pay these people out, and it's not in my money, so what do I care, right? As the next thing is says, well, insurance isn't going to cover it, so now they're going to come after me. Okay, so the equation of them coming after me has to do with their the lawsuit itself, like how much money can they sue me for? How likely are they to win that lawsuit? Right? And then what's their ability to collect on it after they win? So that's like the 3 legs of the stool of lawsuits that they teach you in 101 litigation school, right? And so what we say is, well, we can't do anything about like their probability of winning the lawsuit, and we can't do anything about how much they're going to sue us for, right? The only thing that we can really do is look at this question of says like, well, what's their ability to collect and their belief about their ability to collect. So when you hold assets anonymously, you get into a car wreck and people are searching for your name. Well, does this person own any companies? Do they own any assets in their name? They're looking for stuff to say, hey, is there things that we know that we can take if we're successful in this lawsuit? Because they don't get to know that on the front end. They have to go through the full lawsuit first, win, and then they can ask for information about that. So if it looks like you don't own anything on any public records, well, now it's less. They are more convinced that this is a bad lawsuit because they can spend a $25,000 to $50,000 on a lawsuit, and then there's nothing there to collect against. Now they can still sue you, and the anonymity is not going to do anything after they decide to sue you. It just tries to stop them beforehand. After they sue you, what you're relying on is the compartmentalization and the protection of your LLC structure. So all your LLCs need to be formed in Delaware, Texas, Nevada, or Wyoming. So they have charging order protection. They all need to only own one asset or have compartmentalized each asset. And by doing that, what happens is if they sue you, they can't get to any of your assets and they can't get to your companies. And then if they sue what's going on with the individual asset, like somebody gets hurt on one of the properties and the insurance company doesn't cover it for a number of different reasons, they have a ton of different reasons they can choose. Then what happens is that only that one property is at risk, which usually is not that much money because there's a bunch of financing on the property, right? So then it makes it like, oh, well, then there's only this small little bucket of money that they can come after. Now imagine the difference between, if you're a plaintiff's attorney and saying, okay, I have a hell of a castle of protection I got to fight through. Then I got to risk a bunch of money at trial. And then I only am going to be able to get like what's left over on this one property versus them saying, cool, we're going to sue this dude Kobe for sure because he's got 8 properties in his personal name and has like all these assets. So we're definitely going to be able to get paid out.
Yeah, so that I think that clears it up a lot about what it means to be anonymous. And I actually have a follow-up question to that as you were going through it, which is a lot of real estate investors, and when including yourself, they're public figures in a way, right? They're all over social media. I mean, you're all on this podcast, and there's other investors who are on multiple podcasts and have multiple hundreds of thousands of followers on YouTube and Instagram and different social media accounts. So in that case, would that kind of just cancel out the anonymous aspect of that? Because I'm sure people know these people, they know they
Yeah, but
just
I don't know where your assets are, and I don't know what the extent of those assets are. All I know is you're a guy that came on video that says that you own stuff. So the place you're putting me in is saying like I got to spend 25 to 50K on a gamble that maybe you still own. Maybe you still own it. Maybe you own it inside of a protected structure. Maybe you own it through some other stuff. I don't know. I have no idea. There's a way in which that there's going to be information that people can take guesses about what's going on. Then the next question you ask yourself is how many guesses am I going to make them take to be able to say how risky is it going to feel? And then if you're ultra conservative, you won't be on social media, right? Saying I got all these properties and let me tell you the address where they're located. Okay, well maybe you don't do that, because you say, well, that's too much exposure for me, right? So everybody needs to pick about like saying like what's going to make the reasonable, rational sense of what they want to do. How much money do they want to spend on this stuff? How are they going to operate their life to have the right kind of anonymity and privacy that they want to? And the point that I'm really trying to get to is the fact is the way that you get there is working with a professional team, a team that understands like, okay, here's going to be the privacy concerns, the asset protection concerns, the tax concerns, the portfolio strategy concerns, your lifestyle concerns, your operating, if you have like another business that's associated like with it, and then trying to get like a cohesive strategy that's put in place that says, cool, like here's the very best thinking that I can do that makes my life work as simply and holistically integrated as possible. And that's different for every single person.
Right. Yeah, and that's what I was gonna kind of get to as well, because I think there's a lot of people out there who are kind of coming up, right? And they're sharing, like you were saying, they're doing, social media posts, and they're sharing like the address, the properties that they're buying and they're holding as well, and they're posting them on social media just to get lenders or get new deals or just get some new followers as well. And I was gonna see, what is your advice on that? I mean, should somebody do that or?
Fine, if that's the way you're making money, right? If like, because at some point of the day, you have to figure out how am I making money right now, and then say, cool, that's the way I'm making money. Then I'm going to hedge off on as many risks as possible as I can after that. So I'm going to compartmentalize. I'm going to advertise every single SFR that I bought. Great. Now let's compartmentalize and own all those assets anonymously on public record purposes, right? And then you say, well, is there anything else that I can do from there? Well, sure. Yeah, you can actually do something called equity stripping, where you create your own private company to place notes onto your own property. So that way there's zero equity in the properties. So I have like a lot of Chinese investors, for example, it's just like one demographic. They love to own everything in cash. So I have couple multi-million dollar properties that they'll own in cash. When they come in, I'm like, hey, listen, we're going to place, that property is worth 3 million. We're going to place a $3.5 million note onto that property. And that note's going to be owned by a completely separate LLC that you ultimately own. And so that way, if this property is ever sued, even though it's in the smallest bucket we can get, it's all held by a single LLC or a child series of a series LLC, or your own private mortgage company, which it's basically a mortgage company, but it's basically just an LLC that's a note lender. There's no registration requirement or anything for it. Has to get paid out first. So now there's no equity in the property. So if you're going to be doing stuff that's more risky, like I'm going to have a ton of equity in the property, or I'm advertising what all the properties I own, you might want to spend more money on protection if you feel like, hey, great, I want to be able to do that and be able to tell everybody everything and know like, hey, I'm belt and suspenders in an AK-47, kind of protection.
Right. Yeah. And I think that's really interesting, right? Because I don't think a lot of people understand the intricacies of that. They're not working with a team of professionals like that you have yourself and, what your company is doing, because they're just kind of out there, even if they're a little bit more experienced in real estate investing, kind of listening to what other investors are saying and kind of, what people are referring them to do and different things like that. So, there's probably a lot of investors out there, and maybe you can even touch on that a little bit, that are, maybe they hold pretty big positions in real estate, but they're not protected correctly and they're really at risk. So, really the question I think for you is, what is it that you and your team really help investors with from like a holistic perspective? What are some of the most important points that you see people out there that own real estate that are missing that you guys are kind of filling in the holes? And just kind of a general overview of what is it that your team does to kind of help people build that, like you say, integrated and holistic asset building strategy.
Yeah, so our typical client is somebody making over $200,000 a year in household income. So like husband and wife, or I guess husband, wife, whatever, or XY. I don't know how many different combinations you can get into these days, right? But anyway, two people married or household, income and over 200K. And that's really that's our big benchmark. It doesn't really have much to do, in the very beginning, it was all just real estate investors because that's what I started with. But as I branched out into all different types of investing and started working with people there too, well, so did we, right? So we really said real estate's the hardest thing to look at. So we kind of did, we built everything off of like what's the very hardest thing to have to help to be able to help people with. And now we work with any type of investor. The reason we look at for above 200K is because that's typically where the tax savings. We're so good at tax that like the tax savings actually pays for everything, right? And so that's the way we're the only company I know that talks to people not about like, oh, we're asset protection and tax. We're a company that's looking for relationships that says we deliver to you a true ROI. Like the investment in us should pay you somewhere between a 50 to 100% return per year, and that it's the only guaranteed return you can ever get. Because taxes, you always have to pay for them every year. If you don't pay for them, the government just takes it. And that's why all rich people like focus on taxes. And we're so good at taxes for those people that are above 200K and household income. They say, great, we are your absolute best performing investment because there's nobody else out there that's giving you a guaranteed 50% to 100% plus return on your money by working with them.
Yeah, and that's really interesting, right? Because I think a lot of people are interested in that aspect of it as well, which is the tax savings and what they can and can't do. And there's a lot of new things that come up every year, and the tax code changes, and lots of different things that happen, between one tax season and another tax season that they're always kind of on edge about what can they depreciate, what can they write off, how much money are they going to be paying out. So, from kind of what you've seen so far, what would you say are the biggest places that investors are missing when they can be saving money on taxes, especially if they're kind of in that bracket of people that you're working with of $200,000 and up?
Yeah, so there's three different considerations for saving money on taxes. There's deductions, tax shelters, and your investments. So your deductions are your bread and butter, right? Most CPAs will actually mess up on deductions, but like a good CPA will catch all the deductions, right? And they'll actually advise you on things like, okay, cool, how can you get your automobiles to be as like part of your business? How can you be gifting money to be able to save money on taxes? How can you hire your kids and pay them like a legitimate wage? There's like a model for your website that can earn just about any amount of money, right? And so those are like some of your basic like low hanging fruit that most people miss, that are like great extra deductions that you can be taking apart from like, okay, how do you write off your vacations as business expenses and have those be legitimate, past scrutiny and those kinds of things. Your next phase in tax savings is always going to be tax shelters. And your tax shelters are going to depend upon like what is your overarching goal, right? So like retirement accounts aren't bad. It's bad if you want cash flow to retire or get out of the rat race early, right? If you're like I'm hell bent on working until I'm 60, whatever, right? Then great. Then there's nothing wrong with retirement accounts. But most of the people we work with are trying to say like, well, how quickly can I get financially free, durably financially free? What do I need to do that, right? And so, okay, great, that changes the equation. Then you want to start looking at things that are like private foundations, where you can take 30% of your income each year, put it into a private foundation. You control the foundation can make investments into anything. The gains in those investments are tax free. And then you can take a salary. So whenever you're ready to flip the switch to say, cool, I'm ready to be financially free, you just start taking a salary out of your own private foundation that has a portfolio in real estate, oil and gas, crypto, or whatever, right? But you made all that money and continue to grow all that money without paying taxes on it. And then lastly, what you want to look for tax saving is the type of investments you're making, right? So if you're if you or your spouse is able to qualify as a real estate professional, then great. I'd be taking advantage of limited partnership deals inside of real estate where I'm getting 160 plus bonus depreciation. and then using that to write off my active income, taxes. If I can't do that because I'm like a doctor or a lawyer, I have high W-2 income and I can't qualify as a real estate professional, can't get my spouse to qualify as a real estate professional, then great. I'm looking for oil and gas types of investments most of the time, right? Some type of machinery based investment, because those give me 90% depreciation in the year that I place the money. Typically are paying me out about 15-ish, cash flow. And then will give me like some of their like kicker on top of that as a return. That's usually about another 15%. Most of these types of deals you can find out there are going to pay you about 30%. Portion of that's cash flow, portion of that's an internal rate of return. But as taxes go, that's your three levers. It's how good can I get on my deductions? What's going to be the appropriate types of tax shelters? And then lastly, like what are the types of investments that I'm going to get in that are going to give me the right kind of tax offset? So I make a bunch of money back on my first year, just saving money on taxes by having made that investment.
Yeah, and it's a really good way to look at it, right? It kind of starts from before you even put your money into an investment, right? So what type of assets are you investing in has a lot to do with, the amount of taxes that you're going to be able to save every year and kind of your specific situation. So it really starts from before investing in something. So I mean, do you guys work with people who, before they're investing as well?
Yeah.
Or
Our thing is, are you making enough money? Right? If you're making enough money, then you're gonna like great. Then we have this whole thing called systems, processes, teams, and stuff that we spent 10 years figuring out what are all the most sophisticated ways to be able to do this, right? And what we talk about it as being as like we create for the client, we look at it as saying like, well, we're actually going to make them the CEO of a wealth building company that we're going to build for them and then train them how to use with an existing team, systems, and processes. And so the idea there is that you actually probably, unless you've built a bunch of companies, you don't even know what that means, right? And that's okay, right? But what it means is like you need certain key players. Those players need certain meetings. Those meetings need to have certain agendas. You need certain types of like strategic reporting, which will tell you, okay, how much money are we planning on making? How much money do we need to save on tax? Okay, what's our portfolio going to do? And that's why you need like CPAs, CFAs, MBAs, attorneys, paralegals. You need all these people to kind of work together. And the reason why, like, what my company is special is because I've actually taken all the time to do that for myself. And I use all these people for me. And that's how I know what the quality standard is for being able to say, yeah, this is actually how you get there. And you're not going to, everything will get up and running in 6 weeks, but we anticipated taking you 6 months to really learn it. And then over the course of like that first year, you should have mastered, okay, here's how the full money system of the strategic planning to the types of reporting to the meeting structures, how all of that's supposed to work to like a really high degree of professional relationship. So that's the intention.
yeah, absolutely. So so you mentioned that you work with people who are making, household income $200,000 and up every year. So for people who are listening to this who might not be in that bracket yet, I mean, they're working up towards that bracket. Maybe they're newer investors, maybe they're just starting out. What would your advice be to them to kind of protect themselves, kind of set the groundwork, right, and protect themselves before they get to that place? Because I'm sure you would agree, if they are protecting themselves correctly before, it's actually easier for them to, if they work with you,
Sure.
right, do the same thing moving forward. So what is your advice to them? Should they be looking for like
I,
CPAs or?
I give it all away for free, right? All the information that you need to know about like that question and any other questions you might want to know. I'll give it away for free on the website. If you look at there's a link that says like a vault that's in the top right hand corner of the page. I have 11 ebooks in there, hundreds of hours of video, and all the course training. It's worth thousands of dollars. It's the same training that we use to onboard staff that comes in here, and it's like, great, here's everything you would need to know about asset protection, estate planning, tax, and your investing and the reporting structure and like the tools that go along with that, right? So what you should do is if you're not making enough money to have like a done for you option to hire us, is like we charge typically between like 15 to 25K to be able to do this full build, full support like structure. Then go get educated. And the best way to get educated is actually just go straight to the resources, and it's dummy proof about like this is what you need to do first, right? Like seriously, it's like we go all the way down to the question about saying like, should I form an LLC at all, right? And then like my answer to that question is like, would you cry if you lost it? Because if you're going to cry if you lose it, then let's have at least one LLC in place, right? And then we'll talk about, okay, what do we go from there? Like, how do I know when I need to get a second LLC? When should I be doing these trusts or like whatever? It's all there inside the vault, inside of the training, and it's all for free. So I encourage everybody just to go there and check that out.
Yeah, absolutely. So, Scott, thank you so much for being on the show today. And you mentioned the vault, so I'm going to give you a chance here to share anything that you think people will benefit from. If somebody's listening to this, watching this, and they want to get to your vault and they want to follow you on different social media places and really get educated from directly from the source, what are the best places to find you? Where can they find that big resources vault with all the free information?
Yeah, so it's just royallegalsolutions.com is the best thing to go for everything, right? The vault is where you're going to find all the free resources to basically get like a bunch of free training on how everything works. The other thing that's really cool is a video that's right there, like on the homepage of the website. And there we actually show you what you need to do to be able to create a wealth building company, right? And essentially, this is all the best practices that every investor should be putting in place. And so it's like we show you like here's exactly how all of that works and why it all works this way. And of course, then we say, oh, here's how we actually do it to be able to help you get this so you don't take 5 years to build this on your own. It's like here's how you get it done in 6 weeks, right? So that's a really cool resource to be able to check out. Okay, what does it take for me to really professionalize my like investing life, to have it all all done to best practice standards. And then we have a ton of testimonials on the website that are video testimonials directly from clients. Because what our number one objection that we get for people looking to do this is they say, how come I've never heard about this before? And this doesn't seem like it can possibly be true. And so I was like, great, well, let me show you some clients. Because here's all the people, we've helped over 2,000 people, and here's a bunch of them that you can actually go talk to if you want to about how they saved hundreds of thousands of dollars in tax or whatever the case may be.
Awesome, man. We'll make sure to leave all of that information in the link below. So make sure to go check out Scott's website, royallegalsolutions.com. And yeah, so thank you so much again, Scott, for being here, sharing your value with us, sharing your experience with us. Before we let you hop off here, was there any last pieces of advice, any last tips you want to leave with the audience before we let you go?
Yeah, I would say take action at least to the smallest step, like right now. Like right now, whatever is that you can do, even if it's just like subscribe to a newsletter or like register for the vault or something, like do something in this moment. If this is something that you said, hey, this is something I'm interested about, because then we'll help hold the accountability for you about like how to stay engaged about moving forward in this process. And some people, it takes them like a year before they're really ready to do something. But if you don't take any action, we don't know how to stay in contact with you. We don't know how to help you with that accountability. And that's part of what we look for is how do we help other people hold accountability for the things that they're saying that they want in their life, especially when it comes to their finances. So I need you to take that action step right now. Just do it right now while you got a second and before you get into the next thing.
Awesome, man. Thank you again, Scott. And thank you for tuning in. And we'll see you on the next show. Take
Thanks,
care.
Kevin.